Thank you, John, and thanks to all of you for staying to the very end. I think this talk is in some ways a footnote to Bishop Tighe's overview of digital culture, but also a footnote to many of the beautiful theological reflections that have come before this. But I want to pursue an idea that Bishop Tighe raised in his talk regarding the limitations of digital culture and how that relates to the church. Because I think it's a fairly deep issue for the church to consider. So I want to do two things. First, kind of lay out the environmental context, which is kind of borrowing from Pope Francis, looking at how the technocratic paradigm, which is in chapter 3 of Laudato Si, absorbs the language of religiosity for its own profit. So what are the cultural conditions in which we're working now? And then how might we respond as a church? So how does the church, how can it be reclaimed in these digital conditions for not for profit, but for prophetic witness? So in Victor Hugo's novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the archdeacon looks up at the Notre Dame Cathedral and he has a book in his hand and he says, "This will kill that. The book will kill the edifice." And I think the presentiment that the archdeacon had was that when forms of communication change at such a fundamental level, when we have these revolutions in technology, particularly as they relate to communication, that human thought changes, human consciousness changes as well. So you can think of oral societies that would have a different sort of frame of reference or consciousness for engaging with the world and the sacred than, say, a print society. Oral societies would be much more invested in memory, whereas a print or electronic society is recording its memory, as it were, and so the internalization of memory is less necessary. So there are these kind of formal effects or causes that we undergo as a culture and as a civilization when these changes occur, and I think it's important to raise those to consciousness as the church engages this new environment. And in addition to those effects, the effect of the form, there's the effect of politics and economics and all the rest. So if we think of the printing press, it paved the way for the Protestant Reformation and all the political economic changes that went along with the changes in Western Europe at that time. A lot of that, the printing press was a catalyst for. So we know from Laudato Si that the Pope is concerned about an environment which is so defined by the technology. So he puts it this way in chapter 3, technological products are not neutral, for they create a framework which ends up conditioning lifestyles, shaping social possibilities along the lines dictated by the interests of certain powerful groups. Decisions which may seem purely instrumental are in reality decisions about the kind of society we want to build. So what does he mean by this? I'm going to use a kind of a riddle or an illustration here and ask, what do Facebook, Donald Trump, and Rene Girard have in common? And the unlikely answer is a guy named Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is the founder of PayPal, which was recently valued at $50 billion. He made the savvy investment or decision to invest in a little company run out of a college dorm room called Facebook back in 2004. He gave Mark Zuckerberg $500,000, and 8 years later, his investment was worth more than $1 billion. Thiel's also been connected to Donald Trump. He's invested over $1 million in his campaign and even spoke at the Republican National Convention, leading many to wonder why a Silicon Valley billionaire would buck the political orthodoxy of his contemporaries and support Trump. But Thiel saw something in Facebook and in Trump, and that's where Rene Girard comes in. So Thiel is not just some tech expert who's really savvy with making good investments. He's a deep thinker. He's applied that thinking to business and strategic decision making. As a student at Stanford, Thiel did not major in computer science or business. He studied 20th century philosophy, and that's how he met Girard. Girard was a French philosopher and Catholic convert, best known for his theory of mimetic desire. the idea that our desires are always provoked by the desires of another person. It's the process by which we learn how and what to desire. So rival A or model A desires an object because rival B desires it. And it's a triangular relationship with that object of desire. So our desires are always mediated, according to Girard, by others who desire the same thing. And we also see ourselves in others who share our desires, and we may even model them and their behavior. So Girard discovered this mimetic pattern in literature and history, in the novels of Dostoevsky, and he actually credited the reading of these books with his own conversion to Catholicism. But it was Peter Thiel, who applied the insights of mimetic desire to digital culture. So mimesis was this key idea that he took away from Girard in his undergraduate studies, again in philosophy, not in computer science or business, but from the liberal arts, from philosophy. And he saw Facebook as a giant social experiment that was fueled by mimetic desire. So the social network mediates the presentation of these objects of desire, which are then liked and shared, which then make them more desirable. And the social network enjoins users to enter into these chains of mimesis, to signal their desires to others, and then elicit further desires in the process. So the social media algorithms themselves, the way these systems are built on mimetic principles. But here's the twist. The end of this is marketing dollars, advertising dollars, right? So it's extremely rich data for marketers, which makes it a really good investment for people like Thiel. But the other side of this, too, is that mimetic desire leads to rivalry, and it leads to scapegoating, and in some cases, violence. So when many people are in competition for the same thing, that violence may ensue. So think of Cain and Abel. So for millennia, cultures have scapegoated. It was a way to restore calm and peace. They would project their rivalries or their violence onto others, onto a scapegoat, in order to restore their order. So think of social networks then. If we think of them as communities, these communities repeat this cycle of scapegoating in order to preserve their sense of right and wrong by projecting the blame onto easy targets in the digital sphere, who are often more than happy to be the villain if it means more clicks or likes, or in the case of Trump, more votes. So if we follow Girard's theory all the way through, the mimetic desire that's being cultivated by the logic of the network, by the logic of the social network, for the purpose of generating likes and advertising revenue, it leans towards this rivalry and this scapegoating. It's the engine that drives social media. But Girard argued that Christ broke the cycle of scapegoating, right? So Christ showed that it was the community that was guilty and not the scapegoat. God's offering of his only son as an innocent scapegoat restored the relationship between God and man and gave birth to the church community that no longer needs to find a new scapegoat. So lacking a telos like this, social media, the logos, the word made flesh, the online environment betrays the Augustinian idea that our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. So why does this matter for the church? I'm arguing that religion and technology are locked in their own mimetic rivalry. We see churches adopting new technology in quick fashion to sort of keep up with the trends, but we also see technology companies, as we just demonstrated, using the intellectual, cultural, spiritual heritage of the church to promote its own sort of agenda. The architects of this paradigm that Pope Francis references are not friendly to the church, necessarily. And in some cases, very anti-Catholic and more post-human. They're moving us towards a post-human future, and they're doing it by mimicking religiosity, generating fervor and zeal among people and users of these networks. But they're shaping these networks with a horizontal telos in mind, a telos in which various forms of escape from our nature are being made to seem more attractive. So artificial intelligence, biological enhancement, space travel, virtual reality, just a few of the projects being funded by the same people who are building the search engines and social networks that are so formative in culture today. So As these machines, these networks become more sophisticated, they become more mysterious and even monstrous. Their relationship to nature becomes more ambiguous. And as social structures change to accommodate this industry of interconnected machines, man finds himself in a position not unlike his ancestor, who stood in awe, in fear, in the face of the capricious forces of nature. Though he doesn't fully understand the technical forces behind the newest technologies, he does his best to adapt. And like his ancestor before him, part of this adaptation is the creation of explanatory myth. So for the ancient, the myths were tied to the cycles of nature, but modern myths about technology can be found in dystopian science fiction novels and even in computer advertising itself. So just a kind of a quick parable example with Steve Jobs. The mythos of Jobs and the Apple Computer Company, complete with charismatic and prophetic leader, a devoted following of digital disciples, a series of technologies that encourage their own rituals and practices, further reveals this mimetic rivalry between religion and technology. The two model one another as they jockey for the shared object of desire, which is devoted followers. Jobs and the other pioneers of the computer revolution came out of that countercultural ethos of the 1960s that sought to rethink the computer not as a Cold War machine, part of a massive dehumanized military-industrial complex, but something more akin to the hammer of our ancestor, an extension of the self that was natural in some way. So rather than extending the hand, like the hammer does, or the foot, like the bicycle does, the computer promised to extend the mind itself. Jobs was a devotee of Zen Buddhism and believed that computer technology extended human consciousness. So he was fond of this practice of metaconscious meditation, which is sort of thinking about thinking, very Buddhist idea. And he created machines that could think like us and could make us, in the words of his marketing slogan in the 90s, think different. So he was winning converts, not by proselytizing or evangelizing, but by reshaping the psychological environment with technology. And this is the power of myth and story, but more importantly, the power of technologies to reshape the human sensorium, human memory, human imagination. As the Jesuit priest John Culkin put it, we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. So if we are thinking with and like our computer counterparts, then how are we imagining? What are we imagining? Jobs himself deployed archetypes from the Catholic imagination to sell his technological vision. Besides the half-eaten Apple logo conjuring the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, the first ad for the iPhone in 2007 shows the resonance between the playful tagline, "Touching is believing," and the gospel account of doubting Thomas. The postmodern move here relocates the signifier "touching is believing" from the religious narrative to the technological one. And the ad asks the viewer to confirm his or her faith in the digital revolution through touching, the most intimate of the senses. And this bodily act of touching, which we're so used to now with touch screens and so forth, should be a reminder that the conditions of digital culture actually favor the discarnate or disembodied. For an incarnate religion, like Catholicism, that believes that God became man and he died and rose in the flesh again on the third day, that he and his mother were assumed body and soul into heaven, that the church is his mystical body on earth, the disembodied religion of technology that has contempt for the limitations of the body poses a real challenge to incarnate religion. So that's sort of a brief, very brief sketch of kind of the psychological, political, economic drivers behind the new psychology, which sort of undergirds the technological environment or the technocratic paradigm, as Pope Francis puts it. So I don't want to be too bleak. I want to offer some hope here, some strategies for engaging with this environment, because again, I think it's just as important as when the church had to engage the printing press. And again, we know the fallout from that. So this is a similar pivotal moment in the history of the church. The Holy Father offers us these words in Laudato Si: "It's become countercultural to choose a lifestyle whose goals are even partly independent of technology." of its cost and its power to globalize and make us all the same. All of this shows the urgent need for us to move forward in a bold cultural revolution. So we do have to become, I think, countercultural in some ways when it comes to technology. But this is not an untenable or losing strategy. In fact, it was, again, the counterculturalists of the 1960s that ended up pioneering the technological revolution and setting the cultural agenda today. And as Bishop Teig mentioned the other day, many of these Silicon Valley executives actually send their children to these Waldorf schools, which don't have computers in them. They actually learn math by counting beans and all sorts of hands-on activities, not unlike Montessori schools. And it seems that if they're the ones who see how the sausage is being made in the digital world, and it's turning their stomachs, that we should all be seeking something perhaps more nourishing, especially for children. One of the many things, or of the many things that are forgotten when we're fully enmeshed in this culture is the notion of leisure. And so I think this is one strategy that the church might adopt in trying to recover our senses, as it were, and reconcile that split between body and soul that modernity and modern technology has done. So at the heart of technological culture is this weird paradox where we're trying to reduce human work by all these machines, and yet at the same time, people are losing their jobs to these machines, and many are working harder than they ever have before, constantly on email or messaging, and even when someone's not working, when they're on Facebook or watching a film online, they're doing the work of the marketers, right? They're volunteering their personal data and habits and behaviors online for the sort of big data enterprise so that they can be more targeted in the future. It's what Mark Andrejevic calls the work of being watched. So this leaves little room for real or true or authentic leisure, the ability to participate in activities for their own sake and not to serve some utilitarian end. And I think this loss of leisure and loss of memory is one of the more troubling aspects of this technological trajectory. So in Laudato Si, again, which I think is a very good guide for thinking through some of these problems, Pope Francis calls for recovering a correct understanding of work, suggesting a more fruitful interplay between recollection and work, and continues, once our human capacity for contemplation and reverence is impaired, it becomes easy for the meaning of work to be misunderstood. So following Joseph Pieper, I think authentic leisure is what gives us time and space for the contemplation of God. Leisure is where religion and worship is born and nurtured. In the absence of such leisure, or its colonization by these always-on technologies, becomes, in a sense, a form of slavery. So I want to offer two examples, kind of tactical examples that have come out of this strategy of thinking both about formal cause and effect of the media environment, but also how we exist within it. I think part of that is a sort of asceticism where we're able to step outside it for periods of time. This could be something you encourage in a parish or school where, don't use your phones on Sundays or on Fridays, sort of weekly, periodic fast from these things to, again, recover that authentic sense of leisure. This is a trend in the culture, by the way, that has caught on, especially in Silicon Valley, again, where they host retreats for these tech executives who are so, as Bishop Teig mentioned in the Circle novel, so overwhelmed with the demands of digital culture that they need these sort of spiritual retreats. And so we should be able to offer these same things and show our understanding of why that's important. So one of the methods that we use in the Institute, and I think this will also set up Lisa's talk very well, is to create content that's attractive. Create content for the social media environment, because we should engage it, that attracts, that is beautiful, and that recovers some sense of memory. So we use this, what's called a content marketing methodology, but we've kind of adapted it for the purposes of the church. As John mentioned, I teach marketing in the business school, so I'm constantly kind of stealing the Egyptian gold and bringing it back to the church to find the best sort of principles and tactics for this. So I don't have a lot of time to go into this, but the basic principle is that we sort of have to meet seekers where they are. So when they're searching Google, for example, for things like, and they do this, I'm lonely. very sort of personal questions, just looking for something, someone to connect to. We need to create content that speaks to those questions first to attract them. And then we can begin to provide some of the weightier and richer sorts of resources that the church has to offer. And most importantly, we need to form a relationship with them. So they're not just nodes in a network, but that the technology engagement is actually a means to an end, the end of which is relationship, communion, and so on. The other thing that we did in the Institute is create an app called 3D Catholic. And again, the idea was, how do we create a technology product that emphasizes incarnation over disincarnation and being disembodied. And so that's the origin of the name 3D Catholic, the three dimensions, the incarnate. And what we did was we came up with 3 devotions. We didn't come up with them, the church did. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving that we wanted to, again, present or represent as a recovery of Catholic memory and imagination. So the app simply reminds you every day at noon to pray the Angelus. It reminds you every Friday to fast from meat, abstain from meat, and on the works of mercy, corporal works of mercy, it offers you suggestions for doing one of these a week. And so the idea is that you're doing these locally, so you're not some detached, node, but you're doing these with other people in your community. And it was launched on the Notre Dame campus and has since spread from there. Another feature of it is connecting people in prayer. So again, these are local prayers, not just prayers from all over the place, for the Kloska family on St. Peter Street, which is a couple blocks from here, right? So offering anonymous prayers, much like some of the messaging platforms do on college campuses today, they'll offer the ability to message anonymously, and you can imagine where the discourse goes when that's happening. So elevating that discourse in the digital sphere. And then finally, as you complete these devotions, a pin is dropped on a map, and it's to show, again, that you're surrounded by others who are doing this in community, and gives you a sense for the scale and reach of the church, the mystical body of the church. So the Holy Father offers us this challenge that there needs to be a distinctive way of looking at things, a way of thinking, policies, an educational program, a lifestyle, and a spirituality which together generate resistance to the assault of the technocratic paradigm. So again, this is a very baked-in mentality, attitude, and the culture that has to be not necessarily, it has to be overcome in the sense that we understand it, we raise it to consciousness, and we develop strategies based on that understanding. So in closing, the problem, I think, in modernity is not an absence of religious fervor and zeal. It's a displaced fervor and zeal. Rather than investing in the risen Christ and his church, many moderns invest in the promise of science and technology to heal social ills, to provide advances that will lead to a more perfected humanity. And what's more, the cultural elites that are funding this are shameless in their ability to co-opt religious rhetoric and teaching and thinking to sell their own vision. So it's not enough for the church just to constantly convey content, no matter how edifying. Must also provide an understanding of this relationship between man and technology, nature and culture, so that technology can be properly appropriated. I'm struck today by today's the feast of St. Paul of the Cross, founder of the Passionists, and I'm from Pittsburgh. There's the first Passionist monastery sits up on Mount Washington, which overlooks the city. And in the midst of all this sort of urban activity, 3 rivers coming together, barges sailing by, people going to work on inclines and on the highways below, you can stand in the center of this garden in the monastery and just experience this intense peace and serenity. So you're not sort of floating above the city or outside the city, you're still in the city, but you're offering a respite, a retreat, a place to recover memory and imagination. I think the church can offer the same thing to the citizens of the digital sphere. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Brett. I don't know, am I on here? Yes? Thank you. What an honor to be here. And particularly humbled that John would invite me, basically a mom from the pew in your parish, to come and be with you And I really am just so humbled to have the next few moments to share with you the work that I do at CatholicMom.com. I represent over 160 of my peers, moms, but also dads and others that are engaged in supporting the work that you do with your flock. Archbishop Chaput gave us an image of Mary yesterday, so I wanted to share one of my favorites, one that's particularly appealing. I don't know if any of you know this particular image. It's referred to as the Polish Madonna, and harkens perhaps a moment in those hidden years of Christ's life, but is very relevant to moms. And a lot of people hear the phrase CatholicMom.com and they think, that the work that we do is to serve homeschooling mothers, stay-at-home moms who are doing this, hanging the laundry on the line. The truth is that the site was created for any woman, and actually any Catholic, and anyone who wants to know about being Catholic. And so what was founded in my home in the year 2000 has grown now to be this just amazing community that I'd like to spend the next 20 minutes sharing with you. A lot of people will ask me about why I started CatholicMom.com, and I like to share that story, first of all, to underscore the fact that, John, my credentials are far less humble than those here. I started it in the year 2000. As we know, that was the Jubilee year. It was also the year that my eldest son, Eric, was preparing for his first communion. And while my husband, Greg, and I met here at the University of Notre Dame, and we fell in love under the shadow of the dome, I shared with one of the bishops a few nights ago that my daddy teases that he sent me to this great university, and I found the one non-Catholic who wasn't on the football team and fell in love with him. We were married in the Basilica the year after we graduated, and we've celebrated 30 years of marriage this year. What a blessing. Amazing. But when I went to that parent class, some of the bishops have mentioned those, the parent education night where the parents are marched into the room, and even though your child is in second grade and you promised at the baptismal font to raise them in the faith, the second grade teacher says to you, you are the primary faith formator of your child. And at that moment, I sort of looked at my husband next to me, who was a really great guy, but didn't know very much about the true presence or anything else that Eric needed to know. And I understood the gravity of that responsibility. I was raised in Orange County. I went all the way through Catholic elementary school, went to Mater Dei High School, but I was born in 1963. So my catechesis growing up was largely felt banners and how to play guitar songs like John Denver at communion services in my school. So I recognized that I had a lot of learning to do. And I didn't start the website back then because I thought I had the answers. It was because I was looking for them. And I was pretty sure that if I was a mom looking for these answers, that there were others out there like me. I went home that night from the first communion meeting and Yahoo'd. I don't even think we had Google back then, so I Yahoo'd Catholic mom, and I found literally nothing. So the next day I went to the bookstore. Remember when we still had those? And I bought those dummies books about how to start a website. And I bought a very clunky piece of software, Microsoft Front Page, that enabled me to spend $10 to register a domain name and to put a little patch up on the web. I think I thought that year that I would probably finish this, quote, hobby around the same time that Eric received his first communion. And now, 16 years later, I'm still learning every day about what it means to be a Catholic mom. And I'm continually surprised at how the site has grown. To give you a little bit of an overview, at this point, it went from me, one mom, to we now have 165 contributors. They're all volunteers. I'd like to say that probably for any bishop in this room, I probably have someone from your diocese maybe who's connected to the website in some way. And they're all like me, the laity, for the most part, who are very anxious not to exposiate or proclaim because we think we know everything, but to live out the mission of what it means to be the domestic church. this deep desire to be Catholic more than just on Sunday mornings, and to share that faith and to celebrate it. So all volunteers, I do share that the website lives in my home. We have one paid employee. She's our scheduler. She lives in New Jersey and I'm out in California. So by the magic of the internet, and even though we've only met in person twice, she's my coworker in the vineyard. And we operate on a shoestring budget that basically comes from a small amount of sponsorship on the site, and also from any revenues that I make in speaking or writing go back into the mission of CatholicMom.com. I pulled some statistics. We offer content now in 3 languages. Interestingly, Portuguese seems to be, we have a contributor from Brazil, and we have a large population around the world that read our Portuguese content. We'd like to do more in Spanish, and I'd love to take the entire website into a Spanish duplicate site, because that's really a need that's out there. Our contributors live in 7 different countries around the world. This last year, we welcomed over 1 million unique visitors. And if you get into the business of website statistics and you look at, how big that is in terms of a website, we're small. But one of my favorite statistics is that 50% of our visitors are repeat visitors. And the truth is that I go out all the time and speak at conferences where women come up to me and say, I've been using your website since 2002 or 2005. So we may be tiny and growing, but we're loyal. The top 10 countries are largely English speaking, and actually the second largest country that visits CatholicMom.com and sends us 20% of our visitors is actually the Philippines. So our reach has grown from my little kitchen in Fresno to truly a worldwide audience. We have 3 priorities on the website: catechesis, the new evangelization, and finally a term that I promise I made my slides before I heard everyone else's talks, this idea of social accompaniment, how we be with our fellow Catholic parents along the path. So I want to go through just a few of the kind of talking points of what we do with each of these particular areas. In catechesis, and again, this is largely started for me because of my own need to grow in my faith. We open every day with a daily gospel reflection. And whoever runs the website at the USCCB probably notices a lot of traffic that we drive to you from Catholic Mom, because the first feature every day is us pointing to you to tell our readers, please go read the gospel. We also point to the bishop's video every day that is a reflection on the gospel. But we've started in the last few years to do these daily gospel reflections, whereby we have our own writers, and this year too, our readers break open what the daily gospel means to them. And what a beautiful reflection on the fact that we are universal in church, that we can come together literally around the globe and reflect on the gospel each day. This year we asked for volunteers for these reflections, and we had 366 people volunteer to write them within 2.5 days. All volunteers, so really a blessing. Another great activity that we offer is our Sunday Gospel activities. And these started for my own kids because I could not get them to shut up in the pew. So I developed coloring pages based on the Sunday Gospels. And this is branched into a whole kind of cohort of free activities that we offer, printables that are for every Sunday. And I often, when I go out and speak, am happy to sit in the pew and see the children come out from Liturgy of the Word carrying our coloring pages. So something that's free for you to use in your diocese. Our special projects are so many. I just want to name a few of them. The first, as we prepared for the Year of Mercy, and with this beautiful document, was to take the document and other papal encyclicals and to break them open as a community. So where the faithful are vitally interested in reading these documents and then understanding and communicating about what it is that they say, we bring them and break them open. One thing that we did as a community in preparation for the Year of Mercy was to do a total consecration as a community. We took 33 days to pray the prayers of the consecration together, to support one another, to encourage each other along that path. And those prayers remain so that every time it's an opening to a new opportunity to be involved with the total consecration, we renew that as a community. We have a deep and abiding partnership with Catholic Relief Services, and I've been so blessed. I received the Eakin Fellowship from CRS a few years ago and was able to travel with them to Rwanda and to see their work on the eve of the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, and to meet mothers like myself who were survivors of the genocide, and to see firsthand what your charity, the Bishop's Charity, does around the world. So we, after that trip, developed what we call Worldview Wednesdays. And every Wednesday, we run a feature from CRS at the website. And every Friday, we do Meatless Friday recipes, not just during Lent, but all year long, to remind, as Tim did this morning, of the beauty of that fast and what it means as a universal church. We make it easy for our families. In the new evangelization, our projects have been mind-blowing. It's been mentioned before, the CatholicMom.com line of books. Imagine my surprise as a mom attending a conference in 2008 to have a Catholic publisher come to me and to say, we heard about you. We'd like you to write a book. That was shocking. But here at Notre Dame, Ave Maria Press, which is an apostolate of the Holy Cross family, has devoted themselves to the CatholicMom.com imprint of books. And we're putting these out every year to serve those moms. One of them was mentioned as sitting down there. If you didn't pick one of those up, please do, because that is the work of 81 co-authors. And for anyone here who's ever done any writing, you can imagine the spreadsheet that went into a book with 81 co-authors. But again, inviting them to break open the Word. We use emergent technologies. That initial website, I'm sure you know this from your own diocesan websites, that every time we think we have a final version of the website, we need to build it again. So we're constantly rebuilding. We're in a blog format so that people can comment. It's heavily moderated because I don't tolerate the kind of nonsense that goes on some Catholic blogs. And I don't want to be leading people into near occasions of sin by being in the com box at CatholicMom.com. So we're a blog, but we're also all over Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. We use Facebook Live. I'm now demystifying Snapchat, just trying to figure out where is it as church that we need to be meeting those seekers that Brett talked about that come to us. It was mentioned, my book, actually, it's the Chime Travelers series. This is a series of fiction for Catholic school students to learn the lives of the saints. And one of the emergent technologies that I'm using this year is I'm making actually Skype visits to Catholic classrooms around the country. So if you have a DRE or Catholic school principal or director of Catholic education, please ask them to invite me. I come and spend 30 minutes with the students. It's free of charge to talk with them about the lives of the saints and about how they are saints in the making. How our church needs them not 15 years from now, but today. And it's amazing to see how that smart board technology that many of you are using in your classrooms can be used to bring an author from half a country away to share her love for the saints and to encourage every child that they are a storyteller and that they have their own unique way of telling the beautiful stories of the gospel. The kids really respond well to this. And then the speaking that I do, I'm really humbled to be invited to dioceses around the country to carry this message in both retreat and conference settings, to carry the message of what it means to be domestic church in its challenges, and also to speak about, for parishes in particular, how we can be fearless in using technology to spread the greatest news in the world, the good news of the gospel. It's mentioned social accompaniment, and I wondered about how I could share this with you, because this is really what our website is all about. And it's kind of ironic that you would think that a piece of technology could be held up as an example of accompaniment, but I've found time and time again when I go out and speak in dioceses that those friendships that were born online, and maybe you've experienced this here in this room too, and nurtured through places like Facebook and Twitter, can become a real pathway to growing in faith. But what we really want for our readers is to return them to you. And I have a whole email inbox file. It's called private. It's emails mostly from women in your diocese that come to me. And I find it kind of sad at times that they will pour out their hearts to a stranger that they've never met before, but they come with pleas for prayers. And my most common response to those is always, have you made an appointment with your pastor? In many cases, have you made an appointment with your pastor for confession? Because really that's what's there present in those emails is this brokenness. And so if the main thing that I do with them is tell them, please email me next week when you've made your appointment with your pastor, then I've succeeded. Because what I want to do is put my website out of business. I want there to be no need for this because we've done such a good job of supporting you and your mission, supporting the pastors that you lead, fulfilling the laity in your own diocese, that there's no need for people to come to us, that they can come within the walls of their parish and receive this. And so I hold the website up to you humbly and say, it's yours. If one of you wants to run CatholicMom.com, I would give it to you tomorrow. But until then, we're here. We're here to journey with these women, but also the men that reach out to us through the website. I'll share with you kind of 3 examples of our contributors as I try to conclude this, to show you this accompaniment at various stages of life. Rebecca is one of our writers. She came to us as a high school intern, and now she's a regular, graduated from college, young woman, and she's seeking out her vocation. She writes with us monthly, and she often writes about this vocational discernment that she feels going on in her heart. Is she called to married life? If so, how does she connect with people around her community? Is she called to religious life? She really doesn't know. Her writings are playing out on the pages of CatholicMom.com and are inviting other young adults to come into these kind of very pivotal moments and to have a conversation. The second family I want to share with you is the family of Tommy. He's one of the 10 dads that write for our site. And Tommy and his wife recently learned in the middle of their pregnancy that their child, Luke, would not survive. They made the decision, because of an anomaly in his health, to carry that pregnancy to full term. And his wife carried Luke through 9 months of pregnancy. And they actually shared this publicly. Tommy did this in his writing on our website and also in social media. And it was a moment for us to realize, as little Luke was buried, that there were other families out there. Irish woman, bring her up to the stage and she cries. That there were families who needed that accompaniment. And the last story that I'll share is of Maria, one of our writers. She's around my age. She's really great. She's raising young adults. And those young adults are Tim's students, probably, who are asking the big questions. And so Maria writes now about what it means to be a Catholic mom who's given her life to raising her kids, who now, is having to answer those tough questions. And I've learned from the raising of now a 25 and a 22-year-old that part of technology and the beauty of it is going together with that child that's asking you those questions and discovering the answers together. So it's not enough to say to our millennials, because it says so in the catechism, we've got to go there and find it with them. And accompaniment done right can provide mothers, fathers, religious sisters, singles, deacons, bishops, what we need to be church to each other the other 6 days of the week. So I thank you for the time, and I encourage you to come visit us. And I also encourage you that if there's anything I can do to serve you in your diocese, that you please call me. I will sleep on the floor in a guest room or wherever you'll put me to come share and to lift up the moms living in your diocese. So thank you, John, for the time, and I think we're welcoming Bishop now.